Imagine having the biggest gun in the galaxy, and still being the first guy to get blown up with it. Like, you didn't just go out with a bang, you built the bang, named it the Death Star, parked it in front of your enemies, and then just stood there smiling while they shot the one weak spot you knew existed. Tarkin wasn't just confident, he was the human embodiment of holding a lit firework and saying it'll be fine. He walks into A New Hope like a smug space principal ready to expel the rebellion for bad behavior, and by the end, the principal's office is scattered across the Yavin system. There's something so painfully satisfying about watching this guy lecture Vader about discipline, while being less disciplined than a Jawa with a credit card. It's like watching someone yell at others for not buckling up while steering their own speeder off a cliff. And here's the wild part. People still act like Tarkin was some kind of tactical genius, a master of fear, a cold, calculating legend. But let's be honest, he didn't defeat the enemy with strategy. He just pointed the galaxy's biggest flashlight at Alderaan and called it a day. No exit plan, no backup. Not even a moment of doubt. Just pure, unfiltered hubris in uniform. The rebellion didn't outgun him. They outthought him. They found the crack in his armor because he never believed one existed. And that's the heart of this entire mess. It's not that Tarkin lacked power, it's that he refused to believe anyone else could have power. And when you live like that, the fall isn't a stumble. It's a detonation. Honestly, watching him mock the Force to Vader's face, then confidently ignore all security warnings, is like watching someone unplug the smoke detector because it was annoying. And then cooking dinner with a flamethrower. You don't even root for his death. It just sort of happens as a cosmic punchline, delivered by a teenager with good aim and unresolved family trauma. In this video, we're breaking down how Grand Moff Tarkin went from the Empire's most intimidating figure to its most explosive cautionary tale. Why his arrogance wasn't just a character flaw, but the literal reason the Death Star exploded, and how one man's refusal to listen got himself and millions of others atomized in less time than it takes to finish a monologue. How does someone rise to the top of the most fearsome regime in the galaxy, and still manage to be that oblivious? I mean, we're talking about a guy who literally had access to the biggest weapon ever built, a planet-killing space station, and still couldn't see the screaming red flags waving right in front of his face. The question is not just how Tarkin failed, it's how no one saw it coming sooner. From the moment he steps on screen in A New Hope, Tarkin oozes confidence like he's the final boss in a strategy game. He strolls around the Death Star like it's his private yacht, casually dismissing concerns from his staff and treating the Force like it's a bedtime story. Meanwhile, the guy standing next to him can choke people with his mind. But sure, let's mock that ancient religion some more. And then there's the sheer pride in his voice when he decides not to evacuate the Death Star. That's not confidence, that's ego on a suicide mission. He has rebel spies running around, an obvious security breach with Leia, and, oh yeah, he literally lets the Falcon go so he can track it. What could possibly go wrong? You'd think, with all his intelligence briefings and access to military reports, he might have just once asked himself, hey, maybe the rebels are smarter than I think. But nope, he keeps pushing forward like a galactic lemming, dragging the Empire along for the ride. What's fascinating here is how someone who seems so commanding, so in control, is actually walking headfirst into disaster and dragging an entire regime with him. This isn't just a villain's downfall, it's a textbook example of how power, when unchecked, can make people blind to the obvious. Let's just take a minute to talk about how maddeningly avoidable this all was. Because honestly, Tarkin had every advantage in the galaxy. A military superweapon, total political backing, and control over fear itself. And yet, he managed to get outplayed by a bunch of farm boys and droids. There were red flags everywhere, the stolen plans, the suspicious escape of the Falcon, Leia's deadpan sarcasm during interrogation. Even Vader was like, hey, maybe don't underestimate the Force this time. But Tarkin? No. He just keeps brushing it all off like a guy who refuses to ask for directions, even when the car is on fire. And when Leia says the rebel base is on Dantwan, what does he do? He wastes time blowing up an empty base just to make a point, like a kid smashing his own toys in a tantrum. It's not strategy, it's pettiness dressed up in military garb. Meanwhile, the rebels are already prepping their counterattack. There's something tragically sad about Tarkin's story. Not in the sympathetic sense, but in how preventable his fate really was. The Empire didn't have to lose its greatest weapon. Millions of lives didn't have to be vaporized in an instant. And all because one man believed he was smarter than reality itself. You watch scenes of him brushing off concern, standing calmly as the rebels close in. And you can't help but feel this strange kind of pity. He truly believed he had already won. He thought fear would last longer than hope, and that control could be maintained with a big enough laser. The destruction of Alderaan, which he approved without flinching, should have been the moment he realized he'd created a symbol, not of power, but of cruelty. He gave the rebellion exactly what it needed: a reason to fight, a cause to rally behind. He didn't crush them, he lit their spark. Tarkin's brand of leadership was built on intimidation, not inspiration. It didn't unite the Empire, it just silenced dissent. Temporarily, but fear doesn't build loyalty, it builds resentment. And in the long run, that's exactly what destroyed him. What's so heartbreaking is that he had all the tools to succeed, and still fell because he couldn't adapt. He couldn't listen, he couldn't doubt himself. And in that silence, in that refusal to change course, he doomed himself and everyone under his command. And yet, for all his failures, you can't deny that Tarkin was a presence. The man walked into a room and instantly commanded attention. Even Vader took orders from him without a word. That kind of authority doesn't just happen. It's built on decades of military maneuvering and political dominance. The sheer scope of what he controlled is mind-blowing. The Death Star wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of imperial dominance, the Empire's ultimate trump card, and he was its captain. That's like being handed the nuclear codes and a spotlight at the same time, and he relished every second of it. You look at his calm, calculated demeanor, and you almost want to believe he's the smartest guy in the room. He speaks with conviction, never raises his voice, and cuts through tension with a glare. It's the kind of leadership that looks great on camera, until it falls apart in practice. The Empire didn't just trust him with its greatest weapon. It celebrated him for it. Promotions, titles, influence across the galaxy. And yet, all of that awe-inspiring power rested on a foundation made of ego and denial. It's impressive and terrifying how someone can build a reputation so large that no one dares question him until it's too late. The shockwave that destroyed the Death Star wasn't just physical. It shattered the myth of Tarkin himself. Here's where things start to feel a little brighter. Because while Tarkin's downfall was colossal, it created the first real proof that the Empire could bleed. His failure wasn't just a tactical blunder. It was a beacon, a message to every system living in fear that yes, the mighty Empire could be defeated. The rebels didn't win because they had more ships or better funding. They won because they believed in something more powerful than fear. They trusted each other. They took a chance, and they found the flaw that Tarkin refused to see. Sometimes, that's all it takes. You can feel the tide turning the moment that torpedo hits. It's not just a victory, it's the beginning of a shift. Suddenly, the galaxy has hope again, and Tarkin's smug face is nowhere to be found. Wiped out in the very moment he thought he'd secured control. This is the power of underestimated people. The ones Tarkin called weak, disorganized, laughable. They saw his pride, his carelessness, and used it against him. They didn't need a Death Star to win. They just needed his arrogance. In a strange way, Tarkin's mistake gave birth to the rebellion as we know it. His overconfidence became their rallying cry. And from that moment on, the war stopped being a one-sided slaughter and started becoming something far more dangerous. A fight for freedom. So here we are, looking back at Grand Moff Tarkin. Not as a legend, but as a cautionary tale. A man who had it all, lost everything, and never once realized the part he played in his own destruction. His was a brilliance undone by blindness. Authority shattered by arrogance. Tarkin wasn't defeated by better weapons. He was defeated by his refusal to learn, his inability to doubt himself, or to consider that the people he dismissed might actually outthink him. That's not just a tactical failure. It's a human one. The irony is brutal. He believed in order above all, and yet sowed chaos with every command. He demanded loyalty, but inspired rebellion. He built a monument to fear, and it became his own tombstone. His legacy isn't one of victory, but of wasted potential. He could have changed the course of history, strengthened the Empire, even outmaneuvered the rebellion, but instead, he chose to play God, and got burned by his own spotlight. And in the end, maybe that's the lesson. The galaxy doesn't need leaders who posture. It needs leaders who listen, adapt, and learn from failure. Because power, without humility, doesn't lead to strength. It leads to a smoking crater in space, and a name forgotten by those who truly matter. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please consider looking at my pinned comment and checking out the links for my Amazon storefront. It contains my favorite Legos, my gear in which I make videos, and comics that I read on a daily basis. I update it constantly, so please, take a moment and click on the link. On top of that, check out my second channel, Critical Analysis Hub Plus, and my third channel, Critical Analysis Hub XP. Just one click would go on a long way in supporting my channels and future in YouTube.